is my studio, and this is where I will be recording videos of demo, so we can continue our drawing practice while school is closed. Show you how to draw from a photograph using a grid system. So this is 18 by 10 inch and something. So I'm just going to make it easy for everyone. Let's try to crop this image so it's exactly 8 by 10. So I think it makes sense if we crop a little bit of the top and a little bit of the bottom. So I'm just going to fold it here. And I'm going to fold a little bit on the bottom based on the mark that I made. Try to make it straight. So now my image is exactly 8 by 10, and here's my paper. It's same as your paper, which is 18 by 24. That means that the maximum height is 18 inches. So we have to do some math here. Like I said, this was 10 inches and my maximum height is 18. So I think I want to make it easy. And let's do 10 inches by, if I do double, that will be 20, which is 2 inches taller than my height. So I'm just gonna multiply everything by 1.5. Okay, so in my drawing, my height will become 15 inches. And that means that my width will become 12 inches. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so what I'm gonna do is go ahead and create 1 by 1 inch grid on my printout, and I'm going to create 1.5 by 1.5 inch on my drawing paper. So I'm back with my grids on the printout. So as we discussed, it's 1 inch by 1 inch grid. It's 8 inches across, so 8 grid across and 10 going down. So 10 of 1 by 1 inch grids going down. Okay, so I'm just going to show you how you can draw the grids on your drawing paper. I have 12 inches by 15 inches square drawn on the paper, and if you want to center your square, if you want to center your drawing, you can do some additional math. So what I did was, this is 24 inches going across, and my intention is to create a rectangle that's 12 inches wide. So I subtracted 12 inches from 24. That leaves me with 12 inches. So I gave 6 inches of space on the right and 6 inches of space on the left. Okay, so now I have my 12 by 15 rectangle here. And as we discussed before, my grids on the paper will be 1.5. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and make tick marks here, increasing by 1.5 inches. Okay. And try to make a couple more of these tick marks. Okay, the more tick marks you have, the more accurate and straight your lines are. I think 3 is a good number, so I'm going to make one more down here. It's 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6, 7.5, 9, 10.5, and then 12. Okay, so once you've done that, all you have to do is just connect those dots. And I want to emphasize that when you do this, don't apply too much pressure, because you understand that eventually these grids that you draw on your drawing paper will go away. You will have to erase these once you've drawn your forms in. Okay, so connect the dots, but don't apply too much pressure. These should be light enough so that it's still visible to you, but you could also easily erase them with eraser. Okay, so I'm gonna come back after finishing all these grids. Okay. So now I'm gonna show you how you can draw using the grid system. Okay. So this is really simple. You basically figure out which grid corresponds to your grid on your drawing. So here is the second grid on the top row, right? And then there is a very particular shape happening with the positive space versus negative space. So you just look at the relationship between positive versus negative space to translate the form on the printout to your paper. Okay, so our negative space drawing exercises become really handy in this case. Okay, and since we will be shading this image in charcoal, don't press too hard when you're sketching this with graphite. Too much graphite becomes like really greasy on the surface and acts as a repellent for dry charcoal. So keep it light and fluffy. Okay, so I'm just continuing with the contour of my form. This is Salvador Dali with his cat. I really like this image. Because there are a lot of textural components, as in hair, wrinkles on the skin, the mustache, all these textile patterns, and of course the hairy texture on the cat. It's really nice. And our third unit is all about texture, illustrating texture using charcoal as medium. So I thought this image is perfect for that. Okay, now I'm just following down and I'm all the way to this grid right here. So I'm back with my finished drawing using the grid system. I use my HB pencil and I mostly focus on capturing the contour line, describing the form on my drawing. I paid less attention to drawing the textural component because I wanted to adjust them as I go about shading in with my charcoal. I printed this out in color. The image was originally in black and white JPEG, but for some reason it has like a lot of bluish tint on the image, so I selected the grayscale option when I printed this image out. And this is a lot easier for me to see and depict in charcoal. So I hope you take my advice and choose the grayscale option to have your images printed. I did a demo on how to draw a portrait with an actual model in front of you. drawing from photograph takes like a completely different skill set, so that's why I wanted to introduce you to the grid method. I hope you find it useful. Okay. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and use the handheld sharpener to sharpen my soft general charcoal pencil. One thing that sometimes happens with sharpening your charcoal pencil with these handheld sharpener is that no matter how much you try, the lead keeps breaking. That's actually what happened for me. The lead kept breaking, and it's not your fault. It's actually means that the charcoal lead inside here is very brittle, or if you have dropped your pencil on the floor, it just kind of like breaks off inside of the wooden case. So it's not your fault. It probably means that it's already, you know, like very fragile inside the case. If that happens, you could also try using the snap-off utility knife. So that's what I'm gonna go ahead and try on my pencil. Okay, so I was able to sharpen my pencil using the snap-off utility knife. Now if you want a sharper point, try using the handheld sharpener at this step. Okay. A lot of people find the hair really challenging. It's really important for you to section out your hair before you start adjusting the texture. What I mean by section is that hair is composed of each individual strands of hair, but it does have big chunks of sections, and you want to identify that. There are big chunks of sections in ponytail, even like really loose hair will have sections. If you're doing like a braided hair, it's really easy because it's already sectioned out in parts for you. In this case with Salvador Dali's hair, it's not as noticeable, but there are some sections happening. For example, there is one section happening right here. So sections of hair could also mean like change in directions of hair, or like a clusters of hair. And a way you can identify sections of hair is by identifying predominant coarse shadows. Okay? Meaning that there are sections where coarse shadows are a lot bigger and thicker and darker. Another thing you can focus is when the direction of the hair strands have major change in direction. Let's go ahead and look for the specific shapes of highlights happening. Okay, and the shapes of highlights that you draw in have critical impact on the texture, right? So instead of drawing round forms, most likely these highlights on the hair have like very pointy edges. Okay, so go ahead and draw those shapes of highlights that you see. Kind of has like water-like or wave-like texture to them. So I've drawn in the shapes of highlights. Now I'm gonna go ahead and just fill in where I see the shadows of the hair. And when you do this, shade into the direction of the cross contour of the hair. Okay, so in this case, like the hair is coming out from the hairline, coming outward, and then it kind of goes backward. Right, it kind of goes backwards. So I'm just going to follow the direction of the hair when I shade in. You can even emphasize each individual hair strand when you shade in the shaded area of the hair like this. Okay, so coming outward and then going backward. Now I'm leaving my highlights negative. So I'm not going in too much of a detail on the hair. I'm just going to keep it loose and finishing identifying my core shadows and really dark areas of the portrait using the same exact pencil. A lot of darkness here on the edge of the cat's ear. That's where the cat's ear and Salvador Dali's face are in contact. So in a way, it is kind of like the occlusion shadow we've been practicing in our still lifes. Where else do we have core shadow? Right here. On the side, along the sides of the nose bridge. The bridge of the nose is like right here. And remember what I told you about the tip of the nose. You can imagine there's a small sphere on the tip of the nose, okay? And the bottom of the sphere is what determines this round edge right here on the tip of the nose. So imagine there's a round sphere, and then you begin to see these shadows happening, following the form of the sphere, right? There's a highlight right here, and then it just gradually gets darker and darker around the highlight. Some core shadow here. Now I'm shading it very lightly, but still thinking about the cross contour, right? So this is the bridge of the nose, but it kind of goes up like this and then downward like this. So when I'm shading in, it's very light and fuzzy, but I'm still following the cross contour. So I'm letting the cross contour dictate the direction of my shading. Okay, I'm gonna be careful so that the skin tone doesn't get too dark. I'm also going to, this is like really rough stage of shading, and I'm eventually also going to be using my fingers and even the blending stump to you know, kind of work on the textural components. So make sure your initial stage, your initial shading of the core shadow doesn't become too dark. So what happens is that the blending tools such as your finger and the blending stump and even like a like roll of paper towel, what it does is it kind of moves around the charcoal powder that's already on the surface, on the drawing surface. So make sure not to overdo shading at this stage. And some core shadow inside the kitty's ear. So in a way, what I'm doing right now is almost kind of like your conditional value exercise, if you remember that from our previous unit. Okay, I'm leaving all the highlights just kind of like as a negative space, and I am just shading in the core shadows and the cast shadows. Basically like the darker area within a single local value, right? So like right here, the side of the head has some core shadows. Here on the left side as well. Okay, so I've addressed the local value and I feel like I have a good conditional value down with charcoal. As you've seen, I used a mix of the peel off charcoal pencil and the charcoal pencil, as well as kneaded eraser to get most of the values. And after cross-hatching with these two materials, to smooth out some surfaces, I used the vine charcoal. So you can see those areas like right here, and like right here, okay, where I cross-hatched with the pencil type and then just went back in to fill in with vine charcoal to achieve the velvet-like texture. So maybe you can use that strategy as well. Now I'm going to show you how to apply some textures. There's a lot of wrinkles on the forehead and like under the eye, on the neck area. And I wanted you to wait until you've addressed the local and conditional value completely before applying texture. Okay? So the values are pretty much all there, so I'm just going to introduce the wrinkles. Okay, but this is the hard part. You don't want to overdo the wrinkles, right? Just think of it as like a very very light veil or like a single layer of texture on top of the surface. Okay, so you want to use very little pressure, and rather than thinking of the wrinkles as just like a line, you want to think of them as shadows. Remember, we talked about that a lot in class. Okay, don't treat these wrinkles as lines, but see them as shadows. They have distinct shapes. Okay, so some areas are more emphasized, as in here, so you want to just do a couple more layers of strokes here and here. Just kind of introduce it very slowly. It's a lot better to do it less than overdoing these textures. And then once you've introduced the textures a little, you can go back in with the kneaded eraser and erase out the areas where you see the highlights. Okay, and these areas are like between the two wrinkles. That way you're creating folds on the skin rather than treating the forehead as a flat surface. So I'm just kind of wiping away some values between these folds. And then this area, this triangular area between the eyebrow and the lower part of the forehead, it typically has like a lot of highlights because it's an area that protrudes out, like right here, the triangular area, and then typically the area is connected to the nose bridge like this. Okay, so there are some wrinkles there. I can show you how to do smaller wrinkles, as in under the eye, which I have already started doing a little bit. So you just introduce the shadows that are creating these wrinkles. And then there are some smaller ones, more subtle ones in between. There are very small wrinkles like going this way as well. It's not very noticeable, but they are there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take away some values here first. That way, when I apply those small wrinkles, they're more visible than right now. The value might be too dark right now. Okay, so here are some wrinkles and the cross contour is going this way. Right, so just introduce them very slightly. You don't have to draw every single wrinkles. Okay, focus on a couple, like some of the most prominent ones. And that's the trick with texture. If you do some of them which are more visible than the other, it kind of creates an impression that the texture is on the entire surface. And if you want a little bit more definition, I've been using the graphite 2B pencil. You're allowed to mix these two mediums, the graphite and charcoal, as long as you're not really like heavily layering them with each other. So I've been saving the graphite for areas where it's pretty much like negative space. Areas where I haven't applied too much charcoal. And then I'm just gonna introduce these small tiny wrinkles on the face. Okay, and basically like the entire face has like little bits of wrinkles. Here too. Here I think it actually makes sense if I use the pencil type eraser to erase or draw the wrinkles in with eraser, because it corresponds with the highlighted areas. So now I'm using the subtractive method to create these wrinkles. Okay.
you.